Before we get going, I'll start with the normal announcements. And that is that I want to remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet. And this recording will then be archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when they're not speaking in order to avoid background noise when others are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, please raise your hand. That's if you have your camera on, or use the raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function, and that's for the sake of this recording. The use of the chat function should be reserved for technical issues to alert myself or the Democratic Services Officer. Thank you. So if we move swiftly to part 1, and this is our apologies for absence from committee members. Do we have any absences today?
Yes, Chair. We have 2 apologies, one from Councillor Johnson and one from Councillor Lovelock Edwards. I don't know if other members have got any they wish to share.
No, I can't see any raised hands, so I think that's okay. So we have 2 absences tonight. Agenda item number 2, that's minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of April 2023. Hopefully, committee members, you've all had a chance to review them. That being said, can I have a hand to move that they are a true and accurate representation of that debate? Thank you. So I have Councillor Hamilton and I've also got Councillor Hanks to second that. Thank you both. If we can now move on to our declarations of interest for tonight's meeting. Do we have any of that? No, can't see anybody's hand raised. That's smashing. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4 then is the Vale of Glan Council Annual Performance Calendar 2023-24. This has come from us from a reference from Cabinet that sat on the 25th of May. And it's over to Tom to give us an update. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks very much indeed. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. Thank you for taking this reference from Cabinet. This is being referred to your Scrutiny Committee alongside all other Scrutiny Committees, and it was also considered by the Governance and Audit Committee previously. And it does 3 things. As part of the report, providing us an update for elected members on the self-assessment process, secondly around the panel peer assessment process, and then finally an overview of the annual performance calendar. This is the 2nd year that we've brought this report to all committees and to Cabinet. We thought it was a useful report last year with a new cohort of elected members, but also a series of quite significant changes to the way the corporate performance is managed in local authorities that were introduced by changes in Part 6 of the Local Government and Elections Act. So in terms of the self-assessment, this is a new duty on local government to undertake a piece of self-reflection on an annual basis, looking at how we're achieving our wellbeing objectives and importantly, how we're using our resources in a value for money terms to help deliver those objectives. So the report before you this evening, Chair, sets out a reflection on the 1st year of that process. It incorporates views of scrutiny committees, feedback that we've had via other local authorities, the WLGA and Welsh Government. We also commissioned internal audit to take a piece of work around our arrangements, and I'm pleased to say that we had a substantial assurance opinion relating to the arrangements that we put in place. So the process this year will build in some additional rigour. So it'll look at the influence of risk in the different areas of the council's business. It also will introduce some changes to the way in which the director peer challenge process operates, and in response to some feedback, also reflecting the simplification of the actual report itself that will come to elected members throughout the autumn into the early winter. So in terms of where we are with that process currently. The Directorate self-assessments are now being drafted. The challenge sessions for each of the 5 directors are scheduled with the Chief Executive and Cabinet members and relevant scrutiny chairs for July. And we will then engage with our partners, the public, trade unions and business over the summer before it starts to make its way through the political process in the autumn. The second element of the report around the panel peer assessment, again, this is a new provision within the Act, and it requires local government to commission an external panel assessment once in each electoral cycle. The report is required to be reported and responded to not less than 6 months prior to the next local government election. WRGA are currently consulting on a proposal to assist local authorities in managing that process on behalf of the council, and we've provided some feedback to the WRGA. It is a political decision as to when that panel assessment would be undertaken. However, members will note that a recommendation is made in the report to undertake the panel assessment in early 2024, and the reason for doing that is so that it would align with the preparatory work for our new 5-year corporate strategy, which we'll be publishing in time for April 2025. And then finally, Chair, in terms of the report, Appendix A provides a calendar of all of the corporate performance-related activity that will be undertaken throughout the year. The purpose of that is to show to members how all of this fits together, from the self-assessment leading to the new annual delivery plan, service plans and target setting, and then quarterly monitoring arrangements of our performance. And it sets out what each committee, including Governance and Audit Committee and Council, as well as Cabinet, can expect throughout the year. I was really pleased over the last 12 months that elected members have participated so proactively in the new informal sessions that we've introduced. So we've kept those in the calendar, and members will note that a date for a session in July is going to be scheduled very soon. The purpose of that one will be to look at the structure and presentation of the self-assessment report back to elected members in the autumn. So that's a really quick overview of the reference, Chair. Obviously happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Any questions now, please, for Tom on this report? Well, it looks like everybody's really, really pleased. I mean, it is comprehensive, and I would say, from my own perspective, it's really pleasing to see that approach to self-assessment is now embedded in our annual performance calendar. I think that's really good, and that you are committed to involving all of us, all of our partners, regulators, citizens, service users, and everybody else, because I think that's quite important for you to understand how everybody else sees that you're doing. So that's great. I take it from the silence that everybody was really happy with what they've seen tonight. So that's great. We'll just go straight to the recommendations if everybody is sure that they don't need to ask any questions on this particular agenda item. And that is that the committee has considered the contents of this report of the annual performance calendar, and are happy that there isn't anything more that we want to add to refer back to Cabinet. So can I have a hand then to move from this agenda item tonight? Thank you. And so that's Councillor Goodjohn, and a hand to second it from Councillor Hamilton. Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, so we'll move swiftly on to agenda item 5. This is the response to the Welsh Government's consultation on the recommendations of the independent review of the ethical standards framework. This is the Richard Penn report, and this is about the harmonisation of gifts and hospitality thresholds to align on an all-Wales approach. This has come from a reference from Standards Committee that sat on the 8th of June. And it's over now to Debbie Miles to take us through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and that was a perfect summary. So the two substantive recommendations here are with regards to the consultation. So that is before you. The reference from Standards Committee highlights where the draft consultation responses were amended, and we've embedded those amendments into Appendix 1, which is before you for ease of reference. So those various changes are reflected in Appendix 1. As the Chair's outlined, this flows from the Richard Penn independent review of the ethical framework, and this is the outcome, the consultation based on the recommendations of that report. I won't take you through the individual responses unless there's any particular request for clarification. I think they're quite self-explanatory. The second element is the recommendation from Standards Committee that we align the threshold for declaration of gifts to the approach which is being adopted across Wales. Certainly recommendation from the National Standards Committee Forum and from the All Wales Monitoring Officer Group, and that's to reduce the existing threshold from £50 to £25. So that's the same as our threshold for hospitality. So that's a nice, easy one to recall. And also we'll be proposing to maintain the additional measure that if there are gifts and hospitality below the £100 or below the sort of £25, threshold, but amount to, over a period of a year, 100 from a single source, that they would also be declared. So we'll be maintaining that, but to align ourselves with the approach which is proposed across Wales, reducing the threshold from £50 to £25 for gifts. So more than happy to take questions with regards to any aspects of the report or indeed the Appendix 1.
Thank you, Debbie. Do we have any questions from committee on this, please? Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Debbie, for the report. A couple of questions in relation to some of the responses. I note a response to question 6, referring appeals back, decisions back to the Standards Committee. I was just wondering if there would be any consideration given to referring them back to a different committee. The only reason why, and it's just something, I'm not expressing a view necessarily on it, but I think it's something to note. Even though the Ombudsman is the one who typically investigates, it is technically the Standards Committee that imposes a sanction. And so is it proper for them to be determining what happens on an appeal when they are the ones who have implemented the sanction in the first place? So, I mean, it's a housekeeping thing as much as anything else, but just wanted to float that, really.
Yes, shall I deal with that question first? So this approach is in line with the approach which has been in place for
I appreciate that.
A number of years.
Yeah.
And it aligns with the approach which is adopted in civil and criminal courts, whereby if a matter is potentially overturned on appeal or the sanction is changed on appeal, it is referred back to the court or the place of first instance. Certainly my experience of the Vale is very much a case of we have always adhered to the adjudication panel for Wales's ruling, a case tribunal, appeal tribunal. If we were not, then we could see ourselves certainly in civil litigation and being taken down that route. If there was that stance taken by the Standards Committee, it wouldn't be the end of the process. It would just then be taken through. There'd be that option to take that through the court process. the problem with referring it to another committee is the statutory framework
Right, okay.
doesn't allow for it. So the decision-making body is the Standards Committee, but rest assured, my experience is that it tends to be more of a courtesy approach to notify that sort of body of first instance. So I haven't got any concerns in that regard.
If there's just one follow-up I could raise on that, when it's referred back to the court in first instance, would that go back in front of the same judge?
Yes, but with the Standards Committee and our hearings of the Standards Committee, of course, all members, unless they've got an interest in the matter, a personal prejudicial interest, sit on the Standards Committee. And that's what the way the law is crafted. So it would go in front of the Standards Committee, and obviously the Standards Committee would be advised by the monitoring officer as well. So so the legislative framework would require it to go back before the Standards Committee.
The only reason I raise that distinction is that obviously when it's referred back to a court, it's not necessarily the same judge. It's going to be the judge hasn't seen the case before, so to speak, whereas the very nature of the Standards Committee means that it will be going back in front of the same people who have determined it at first instance, in effect. But if, as you say, typically they accept the panel's findings in any case, then that's probably all that needs to be said on that.
Yeah. And I think the difficulty of looking for an alternative route is there wouldn't be a body with independent members, and of course the regulations are very prescriptive about who can be an independent member. But yes, I'm more than satisfied that we've got the appropriate sort of approach in place, and as I say, as monitoring officer, I'd be advising the Standards Committee to follow the recommendation from the Adjudication Panel for Wales.
And if you'll indulge me, Chair, could I very briefly ask a separate question on another point in the report? Yeah, thank you. It's just the point really in relation to the summoning of witnesses. I mean, I agree with the position that the authority has set out in its draft response, but if there aren't any powers to actually enforce this, is there actually any point of giving that power to the the committee? It's just, if you can't actually enforce it, it's not really going to have any practical effect.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and indeed that was one of the issues picked up by Standards Committee, that consideration would be required regarding, firstly, who's going to serve the witness summonses and the avenues available, not just to the Adjudication Panel for Wales, but also the Standards Committee if a summons is not adhered to, and also then the implications. So I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Carroll, to point that out, that is an aspect that no doubt Welsh Government would be having regard to, but it is a point that we need to just flag up from our perspective.
Thank you both.
Thank you. They were good questions. Do we have anybody else who'd like to ask Debbie questions? Yeah, Councillor Haynes. Oh, I think Franks might have got there. I can't actually see.
I've had my hand up for a while.
It must be you
happy
then.
to let Councillor Franks go first if he wishes. It's not a problem.
I think it is Councillor Haynes next. I can see the one's come up now. Sorry, Councillor Franks, you're next.
Yeah, just to confirm, Chair, I think it was Councillor Haynes first, just before Councillor Franks.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Franks, for letting me go first. And thank you, Chair, and thank you, Debbie, for the report. Just a couple of things. This £25 is so low, you might as well make it nothing. I feel that it puts us in possibly a position where we have to declare everything. If someone buys me a pint down the pub, it's just a comment. It just makes me feel that, oh, I've got to record every single thing that happens in my life, because it is such a small amount, £100 a year. I just think it makes councillors potentially vulnerable to mistakes, and honest mistakes. But it is what it is. I just think it's worth noting that there is a potential for problems there. But my real question, so point really, is about this ordering of training. I can't remember what it is in here. I caught it somewhere. I'm a bit concerned that a body, a political body, but really, can order an elected member training or anything, really. I myself are answerable to my electorate. I'm not an employee of the council. I am legally responsible to follow the law, where there are consequences if I don't. But if someone feels that should we say, and as someone who's trying to learn Welsh, has to do Welsh training because I didn't speak Welsh correctly, and I know that's a bizarre point, but it's just sometimes it's worth making the point on extremes, and then I refuse, I could be sanctioned. I think it's very worrying that a body of politicians can order another politician to do any training. It doesn't say what training, it just says training. So I think it's a very worrying inclusion in the report, if you don't mind me saying.
Chair, shall I pick up those two? The latter point.
Do. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So training is mentioned in two places. Well, in fact, three. There's an identical reference with regard to the adjudication panel for Wales, as well as the standards committee. So it's question 9, the response to question 9, also 17, and also towards the end of the report. So in response to question 9, where it's asking whether there's a wider range of sanctions available, should be available to the adjudication panel for Wales, within the response, the answer that the standards committee agreed with was that there should be a power to order that training be undertaken and/or an apology issued in addition to existing powers. That if that wasn't adhered to, again, I suppose it's picking up the point that Councillor Carroll made about, well, you can serve a witness summons, but if you can't do anything as a result of somebody not complying with it, what's the point of doing it in the first place? So the follow-up then is that there be a conditional, the power for conditional suspension if the apology isn't given or the training isn't adhered to. So this could relate to, for instance, if a matter comes before the Standards Committee, which is made up of 5 independent members and a community council rep, together with the 3 councillors, of which Councillor Franks is one, on the Standards Committee. So it's just 3 Vale councillors on the Standards Committee. The majority is independent members. That if they're hearing a matter that has been referred to it from the Adjudication Panel for Wales, or indeed it could be extended to our local dispute resolution procedure, and if, for instance, there has been an issue with a breach of the Disability Discrimination requirements, so an Equality Act breach, and it's identified to support that councillor that there should be training on the Equality Act. It is felt, and it's a matter that I do agree with, that there should be that power, because it doesn't currently exist, a power available to the Standards Committee to say, we've recognised a need of training and you're required to attend that training within a month, whatever, because otherwise there could be a repeat of that problem. And of course there are legal requirements on the council with regards to acting in compliance with the Equalities Act. So it's in that type of context. So it's supporting and driving up standards, and that's at the cornerstone of the Standards Committee, about driving up standards. So it is in that context. Towards the end of the report, it refers to mandatory training for councillors with regards to ethical framework, and that is legislation which has been brought in by another route by Welsh Government. The Vale Council back in 2017 recognised the importance of training on the ethical standards because of the implications if a member didn't adhere to those requirements, which could result in the disqualification of that member. As you'll know, in the Declaration of Acceptance of Office, you're undertaking to abide by the Members' Code of Conduct. So that's another mention, but that is being dealt with through other legislative changes. But hopefully that assists, just giving a bit of a context as to why it's felt that there should be that additional sanctioning power, because at the moment the adjudication panel for Wales can only order a suspension for up to 12 months or disqualification, whereas the Standards Committee can order a censure or a suspension or partial suspension for up to 6 months. And it's felt that there should be something just below that if there's a recognised need for training.
Thank you for the explanation. It still worries me, but thank you anyway.
But it's, I think, as Debbie said, isn't it? This is supportive, so it's not punitive. It's a supportive measure, and it would be specific. It's not random training. It's specific to support us as members, hopefully not getting into trouble again. Thank you, Debbie. Councillor Franks, would you like to speak? Thank you.
I wonder if I might say a few words to give comfort to colleagues, especially to George. The Standards Committee, as explained, is made up of mainly first-class councillors and independent members on the committee, and they do exercise great wisdom and skill. So it's not an ad hoc body. I did say mainly first class because there might be one bad apple, as just identified by Debbie, yours truly. But by and large, these are people who do exercise good judgment and skill, and I wouldn't lose too much sleep over their actions. And of course, we are advised by Debbie, and who would disagree with her legal advice? I'll turn it off now, I think.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Franks. Councillor Haynes, you've still got your hand up. I don't know if that's because you wanted to come back or if it's a legacy hand.
Legacy hand, sorry, Chair.
That's all right. It happens to me all the time. Councillor Carroll, would you like to come back in? Yes?
Yeah, two things. First
Sure.
and foremost, for the avoidance of doubt, I wasn't in any way questioning the integrity or professionalism of members on the Standards Commission. On the Standards Committee, it was more a point about the perception rather than anything else. And the second point, I would agree with Councillor Haynes' comments about training. I think we have to be very careful about what is and isn't mandated, given that ultimately we're accountable to our electorate. But as I've said, I'm not sure there's going to be a majority in favour of that on the committee, but I would nonetheless place that view on the record.
Thank you. Anybody else like to raise a question at all? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that, Debbie. If we move then to the recommendations, which were that we consider this draft report and the response at Appendix 1 with the additional amendments that have been agreed by Standards Committee, And also that there is harmonisation for the Vale of Glam Council's threshold for gifts, which has been amended in line with that para 1.5 of this report. So I think that's it for our recommendations here. Can I have a hand then to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And can I have a seconder? Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Franks. That's wonderful. So we shall now move on to agenda item 6. This is the report of the Director of Corporate Resources, the Project Zero update report, and it's back to Tom to take us through this. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. And I'm conscious of committee's comments last month about the length of officer presentations. So I'm going to do my best to summarise what is an enormous programme of work as quickly as I can to enable you to ask any questions. So as members will be aware, Project Zero is born out of a couple of motions. One, the declaration of a climate emergency that was made in July 2019, and then in July 2021 the declaration of a nature emergency as well. And Project Zero brings together the response to the climate emergency and also contributes to efforts in terms of the nature emergency as well. So the report before you this evening was also considered by the Environment and Regeneration Committee yesterday evening. It sets out a significant amount of progress and also responds to your committee and the Environment and Regeneration Committee's feedback when you considered this a number of months ago. The report also aligns with the annual delivery plan for the council and the Public Services Board's wellbeing plan, which I know your committee saw a couple of months ago. So Project Zero has developed a challenge plan. The challenge plan includes 18 challenges across 3 areas of work and includes 80 steps that are required to in order to meet the net zero target for the local authority by 2030 and to contribute to the 2050 net zero goal for Wales. And those 3 areas of work are around demonstrating strong leadership, fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations, and making a difference now. So the report before you this evening has got a couple of appendices. Appendix A is the detailed and comprehensive report against each of those 18 challenges, and Appendix B provides you with a list of the performance indicators that is in response to feedback that elected members provided previously. In terms of the key issues for consideration this evening, in paragraphs 2.3 onwards, there's some feedback based on the comments made by your committee and Environment and Regeneration at your last time of considering this report. Those comments related to the need to focus the council's procurement work, specifically around Project Zero, understanding the impact of buying decisions within the supply chain, because nearly 90% of our emissions sits within those Scope 3 emissions. So you can see some updates in that paragraph in relation to the work being undertaken on the new procurement strategy, and also the monitoring of our carbon footprint and return to Welsh Government, which is due in September of this year. The Environment and Regeneration Committee also made some comments around the need for integrated public transport systems and sustainable transport. And again, the report provides committee with some updates in terms of local bus services, the importance to make members aware that the emergency bus funding by Welsh Government has been extended for another financial year, but is due to end in March 2024. Committee also asked a series of questions around the use of photovoltaic panels within council buildings. So the report provides some update in terms of where they're installed, and also some work that the Housing Department is doing as part of an optimised retrofit solution on a number of council house properties. The report then goes on to provide a summary from paragraphs 2.4 onwards against the major activities underway within each of the themes. I won't go through these in any detail, but you can see some information within the demonstrating strong leadership, focus on the planning for a climate summit with young people in the autumn of this year, the importance of us raising awareness, which was another theme drawn out by elected members. So there is an online hub of information about Project Zero now that has been published, and also some work that is underway as part of our regional commitments around the capital region. In terms of fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations, there's an update here around the commissioning of a green infrastructure plan and the plans for a green growth hub in Barry, as well as electric vehicle charging points that have been installed within council-controlled public car parks in the recent past, and also some updates in terms of our waste and recycling arrangements that are being introduced now over the next few months as well. Finally, in terms of making a difference now, which is relating to the council's direct activities, there are some updates there around the development of 99 new council houses, updates around the school's investment strategy, which includes both our new build schools, but also the maintenance work being done on existing school buildings, an update around the development of a new carbon management plan, which will be completed in the early autumn, as well as the purchase of a new electric recycling vehicle in terms of an update on fleet. Finally, in that section, there's an update for elected members of particular relevance to your committee chair around the programme management arrangements. So based on feedback from committees, we've undertaken a review of those arrangements, looked at the priorities and the impact that the programme can have, and that's reflected in Appendix A in terms of the next steps that are planned for the next period. Paragraph 2.6 provides some information around carbon reporting. I wanted to highlight here that the council's carbon reporting back to Welsh Government is due again in September of this year. There's a further revision to the methodology for that, but it feels as if that is becoming more focused and allowing us to identify the opportunities to decarbonise across the organisation. Your committee as well, Chair, previously requested more detailed information on the resources available to support Project Zero. Within paragraph 2.7, you can see a breakdown of the reserves as they were at the end of the last financial year, so showing the breadth of resources that are available to support this work. Your committee will be aware that a considerable amount of work was done to consolidate corporate reserves as part of the revenue budget setting process for 2023-24. So the up-to-date figure is just over £2.8 million if you consolidate the relevant reserves for Project Zero. And then there's a series of information within the report then that looks at how, in addition to those corporate reserves, the council is making use of other resources to support a variety of activity. Some specific information in there, for example, around the 21st century schools and existing schools estate funding, as well as the links that are being made to the shared prosperity funding that has been provided by UK government. That's as brief an overview as I could manage for members. I'd obviously do my best to answer any questions. There may be some that are specific in nature that I might need to take away for other colleagues to help answer, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. And the first hand we have is from Councillor Franks. So would you like to put your question to Tom? Thank you.
I must say I find this report very interesting, and there's a lot to get your teeth into. So I've got a number of questions, Chair. Shall I ask my 3 points? Then I got some more after another member perhaps has spoken. I'll let you manage. How
many have you got?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There might be stuff that others have got to ask. So yeah, it'd be great if you could stagger this. Thank you.
I will follow your instruction.
Thank you.
I'm interested that a bid has been made for consultants regarding the new green infrastructure plan, and I'd like more information about that. But also, there's reference to tree planting, and I must say I'm a great enthusiast for such things. I'd like details for the committee, please, where these trees have been planted, and perhaps more important, where they're going to be planted. A small point maybe, whenever I raise a question of trains, I'm always told nothing to do with the Vale. So I'm very pleased, Tom, to see an item in here about trains, but I'll give a gripe that they don't link with the main line trains, from Llandrop Major and onwards to Roos. There doesn't seem to be any connectivity. I think that's the right word. I'm scrolling up now to look at the resources, and it seems to me we have got 1.9 million in reserves that were not spent as of the 31st of March 2023. Now, I must say I'm a bit disappointed at that. I would have thought that the demands for investment for what we're talking about would way exceed £1.9 million, and I'm really hoping that we can reduce this amount of reserve by actually spending the resources we've got. Shall I leave it there, Chair?
I think that's fair enough. Yes, that would be great. So consultants, tree planting, aligned timetables with trains, and reserves. It's over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Franks. In terms of the green infrastructure plan, I can get you some further information from the department in terms of the specification around the use of external advice in that regard. And as ever, it's for a combination of three reasons of capacity, independence, and specialist skill. And what we're looking to do with the green infrastructure plan is to have I suppose, a roadmap of how we can improve green infrastructure across the county. That's about the extent of my knowledge that I can give you this evening, and I'll undertake to get you some specific information in the next few days. In terms of tree planting, we are currently finalising a tree strategy, and I know that a mapping exercise has been undertaken to understand the tree coverage across the Vale of Glamorgan. In terms of the specific activity of tree planting over the last 6 months, there have been a series of different projects at Cosmiston, the Grange, some planting at Wenvo, and also at Pencoitra. In terms of what's planned for the next period, I can certainly get you some further details again in the next few days. And around the kind of coordination of trains from main line and branch lines, what I will do is provide your feedback to colleagues in place who represent the council as part of the capital region, and obviously that's some really useful feedback to play into the discussions around the metro. And I know that obviously the new interchange at Barry Docks will be opening shortly, and that is part of that attempt to integrate public transport. In terms of the question around resources and the reserves that you raised, I think it is a good one, and it's an important point to say that the council has established these reserves as an additional set of resources that can be utilised by the organisation in Project Zero related endeavours. They don't cover the full extent of our funding or investment in these schemes. I mentioned earlier things like Sustainable Communities for Learning, that currently new band B schools that have not had business cases approved will have 100% funding from Welsh Government to be zero.
I think you're breaking up, Tom.
Yes.
I don't know, Tom, if you want to turn your camera off and try and see if that improves the bandwidth.
That's been in. Is that any better?
Yes, Tom, I believe
Loud and
so,
clear.
Chair. Yeah.
My apologies. Did you, as a committee, hear the update around resources, Councillor Franks?
The last I heard was 100% for schools from Welsh Government.
Okay, my apologies for the connection dipping. So I was just giving some examples of where, in addition to the corporate reserves, that there is funding available for Project Zero related activity. And you are absolutely right, Councillor Franks, in terms of us wanting and being committed to investing the funding that's available through these reserves. The report also provides members with some information around a new process which has been publicised very widely within the organisation over the last couple of weeks, which means that people can, in effect, bid into those funds. They're required to provide information to demonstrate how the project or initiative would be consistent with the ambitions of Project Zero. And there are a couple of different levels to that. If it's under £5,000 investment, it's a decision that I can make with the relevant senior responsible officer. And if not, we refer it to the Project Zero board to make sure that we're both utilising that funds, but also we're getting them out to invest where they will start to have an impact. So I hope that helps in providing the answers for the questions so far, Councillor Franks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. The next hand up then is Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two questions, Tom. The first one is in relation to the cycling changes, which have obviously been rolled out in phases, but in my own ward have come in within the past couple of months. Since the new system was introduced, I've had several reports from residents, admittedly this is anecdotal, of people claiming that as a result of the new scheme, they've actually been placing more waste in their black bags for non-recyclable waste than they did previously under the old system because of the way in which their waste has been rejected. So to try and minimise the risk of that, they've just taken the decision to max out the black bag, so to speak, and then reduce the chance of that happening. Now, obviously, that's problematic for two reasons. First and foremost, from a resource perspective, if we don't meet the cycling targets, there are financial consequences for that. But secondly, from an environmental perspective, it doesn't help us achieve our environmental credentials either. So my question really is, has there been any analysis done of this to determine whether that's anecdotal, either across the Vale more widely or in the areas where this has recently been introduced, to see if that's the case and whether any further action is required on that? And the second one is probably something better raised with your colleagues in the environment team, but I will place it on the record anyway. It's to do with the verges not being cut on certain roads. I mean, there are instances where that happens, particularly on junctions, and then the view for drivers is obscured. Again, that has potential resource implications if it leads to accidents that the council is then found to be liable for. So again, I would just ask that that's assessed to make sure that any safety issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. In terms of the recycling changes, I can give you a general answer and then I can get some specifics as a follow-up. And I'm aware, having visited the new waste transfer station recently to see the operation there, that the team have anecdotally been reporting that actually they're seeing a reduction in the amount of contaminated recycling as a result of the new source segregated systems, because the previous arrangements with commingling sometimes meant that people didn't know what items to put in, and therefore would put non-recyclable items within those bags, which then meant that recycling was being rejected. But I can certainly get some information in terms of the amount of overall recycling versus the amount of black bag waste, and I can undertake to do that with colleagues from the waste and cleansing team. In terms of verge cutting, I'm aware that the specification around verge cutting it considers those vision splays that you were describing in terms of junctions, for example, but I can get you a thorough answer from the highways team in due course.
Thank you, Tom, for that. The next hand up, I think, is Councillor Haynes. I think you're next.
I believe it's Councillor Goodjohn was before me, Chair, but I'm happy to go next if you wish.
No, you are absolutely right. I couldn't see the sequence of hands, but now I can. Thank you for that, Councillor Haynes. Councillor Goodjohn, please, you're up.
Yeah. So questions, which I can take one at a time, if you like. First off, I think it's important that we all note that 2030, which is our date to decarbonise the council to a net zero target, is 6 years, 6 months and 9 days away from today. I think it's important to put in perspective for everyone. This is not a long time away, and these reports are absolutely necessary, and that our targets, if we're going to meet them, require thorough scrutiny. Like Councillor Franks, I had many questions beforehand, so I've cut them down. I've asked a few beforehand. First off, I'd like to ask, considering the Audit Wales report that came in 2021 regarding scrutiny committees, I was wondering if we can innovate in our scrutiny's engagement in public with the public regarding the Project Zero Hub, and if there's any way that we could possibly consider having more public engagement on how we can improve our Project Zero delivery and the methods that we're using by using public engagement via that new method. And possibly using that to contact scrutiny and to link to the new scrutiny request to have a new item and for a request for consideration, so that we can link that together, so we can get even better scrutiny, so that we can deliver this even faster than we were going to before. And just linked with that, maybe we can have a session, maybe a workshop before a corporate performance meeting in September, when the new figures come out that we're reporting to the Welsh Government, that will be sent to this committee, just explaining and walking through those that report, and linking what are the key priorities that we need to face if we're going to be able to decarbonise by 2030. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom, would you like to come in on any of those points?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'm trying to keep the camera on, so hopefully it'll withstand the bandwidth here. In terms of the Audit Wales report and that link with scrutiny committees, absolutely, I think there is a really interesting opportunity here that the Project Zero Hub is a new public participation platform online. That's the one that enables things like e-petitions, but also our engagement and consultation exercises to be run. So I will certainly take an action to explore how we can perhaps use that to ask some questions around specific areas of activity, and perhaps what we can do as part of the next update report is make sure that there's a section within the report that enables elected members to see the kinds of issues that are being engaged with via that hub, and possibly as well via our social media feeds where we're talking about Project Zero. I think the workshop is something that we're more than happy to facilitate. The return will go in September. It might be a couple of months before we get the results back from Welsh Government, but we could certainly, when we get those figures back, perhaps run a workshop with elected members, and we could use that opportunity to also talk about the community-wide emissions, so that you can see both for the organisation, so that 6 and a bit year challenge, but then also the 2050 challenge in context as well.
Chair, do you want me to ask my next question, or do you want to go to another member first?
ask one more. I think that's okay, and then we'll move on to Councillor Haynes. He was next.
Yes, no problem. I have, as I stated, put in some questions beforehand to Tom, which were brilliantly answered. And I thank you very much for that, and the whole team for getting that together. I just wanted to mention on one point regarding housing, which was the response regarding the retrofit plan within the housing business plan. So the report that we have in front of us, the Project Zero, states that the original target on with our council housing was to reduce the carbon footprint by 80% by 2030. And this has now been revised to a target of reaching EPC A, which is the highest band of energy efficiency, 92 to 100% by 2030 for all social homes, after the recommendations of the Better Homes, Better Wales and Better World report. The response that I'd gotten regarding the plans for that by the building maintenance team seems to suggest that the targets are a little bit too challenging at the moment, and the possibility of a time frame for even net zero by 2033 is proving extremely challenging. And at the moment they're anticipating that it would be around 2035. I was wondering if you could provide any extra information on that, because it seems like a bit of a delay to go from 2030 target to 2035. If that's Welsh Government, then that's absolutely fine, but I'd be interested in what you have to say regarding that.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom, do you want to come back in on that one?
If I may, I'll take that one away to talk
Okay.
with my housing and building maintenance colleagues, just to make sure that I give you a specific and accurate answer to that.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I appreciate committee is hitting you tonight, Tom, with very wide-ranging questions that go out across the authority, and we know that you yourself won't be able to answer all of them, so that's absolutely fine. Councillor Haynes, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom, for the report, and doubly thank you for the brevity of the presentation. I really do appreciate it. If I may, I just got a couple of points, really, Chair, and one concern. First off, yes, I agree totally, and I'm glad that procurement is taking such prominence. It is the quickest and the easiest way to reduce carbon emissions, and I'm also happy to read in there that particularly food, we're trying to go local, and I hope local will get localer and localer, should we say, so it's mainly in the Vale. I also like to thank Councillor Franks for asking about the reserves. So my concern, moving on quickly, is that home working is included in carbon reduction. In my belief, and I think I'm accurate on this, that there will be no actual carbon reduction by someone working from home. All we are doing as an authority is putting that carbon, and also the cost of generating that carbon, onto the employee. And I just don't think that we should include that as a gain in carbon, because that carbon is still being produced. The employee still has to be heated, still has to charge their laptops, they still have to light, they may not have to travel to work, but they are still generating carbon on our behalf. So that was the concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes, and that's a good point. Tom, would you like to come back with that one at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a good point, Councillor Haynes. And what I'll do is have a conversation with our decarbonisation manager, who produces or pulls together the data to return it to Welsh Government. And what I'd like to understand from that modelling is it a direct 100% reduction for each person working from home, or are they factoring in an element of a carbon production, as you say, from when somebody's working from another location? And it is something that we've debated internally as well, because there is, as you say, a need to provide heat and light and power for things. There's also an offset in terms of commuting and travel as well. So I think it was a presentation that a consultant for public health made to us last week, where he was talking about his overall carbon footprint and thinking about actually there are different methods to reduce that, including home working within the mix, but importantly then thinking about how you're commuting and travelling to work to make sure that there's that overall impact. But it is a good challenge and one that I'll pick up, and we can then, if it's not factored in, provide that as some feedback to Welsh Government as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it would be quite an interesting piece of work to do, to actually look at the carbon saving for the lack of journeys for people from going back and forth to work. I don't know if we can do that kind of exercise, because I'm sure there's quite a few tons of carbon that aren't being emitted because that journey isn't being undertaken. But it is important to stress, as we do when we talk about hybrid working, that it isn't a home working, it's hybrid. So that can mean a combination, can't it? So it isn't just the one. We've got Councillor Wood next, please. Would you like to ask your questions?
Yes, good evening, Chair. Good evening, Tom. As Councillor Goodjob pointed out, I mean, we are embarking on some very, very, very ambitious targets: housing, social care, and there are some very, very big numbers that stand out on the dashboard, which I've been looking at, which we've talked about before. And I just look at this report, and there's lots and lots of very ambitious and very good things in it, but there's lots of nice to haves, but there is some very, very big issues about if we are going to go down the decarbonisation route. I understand the ecology of it. I understand greening areas and all the rest of it, but we have to grasp the nettle of actually changing the way and everything the council does to tackle carbon. It's as simple as that. I love putting up bat boxes, very, very wonderful things. But actually, there's a cost to putting those up because someone has to drive to put them up. So we have to really be very focused on the target and grab the big issues. So that's something I really hope that we do. See, we've got 18 issues to tackle, but some are much, much, much bigger than others. And I think we need to remain very focused on housing, on the big issues, because if we do get sidetracked into engagement for which is wonderful to do, it's a great thing to have to do, but there are these much bigger fruit that we must pick off the trees. Not a very green thing to do, I suppose, but that's my point about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
Sorry, that wasn't really a question. Are we prioritising correctly? Would be a better way of asking it. Let's make sure we prioritise correctly. There was a little bit of this. I'm sorry, rambling a bit.
No, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wood, and absolutely that prioritisation piece is something that the board have been working on over the last few months. So we've looked at the return to Welsh Government for our internal carbon, if you like. Yep. We've also looked at the draft of the consultancy report around the emissions of the county as a whole. And you're right, there are 18 challenges, 80 steps, but some of them are really important that we put big and momentum behind really quickly. Others are things that can continue in the background because they'll have less of an impact directly on that that target. So that prioritisation piece has been done. I'm comfortable that the next iteration of your report, which will include, you've got some RAG statuses within the report at the moment, that's going to be refined even more so. And what I'd like to do is be thinking about how we look at the impact as well as progress, so you can start to see those things. And you're absolutely right, 89.5% of the emissions within the supply chain, looking at those, tackling those really big issues, they're the things that we now need to focus in on and continue with the good work in the background. I would say in relation to things like engagement and communication with the community, it's really important that we know that our emissions are a small fraction of the overall county emissions. So there's a really important community leadership role here for the organisation. But absolutely, it doesn't mean that we can't do both, and the prioritisation is obviously incredibly important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. And I think as well, as there are these huge priorities, understand that, but behaviour and cultural change is also something that we really need to see happening. And I wonder, do we have HR on board? Are we looking at where these kind of activities could become embedded in just employees' work objectives? Because it is something that we know everybody will be able to contribute to. So I don't know if that's happened yet or if it can happen.
Absolutely. I think certainly the idea of it being embedded within our own objectives is something that will come through in our appraisals are starting at the moment, and they link with the annual delivery plan. And one of the 3 critical challenges identified is around Project Zero. And I know colleagues in HR and OD as well as the internal communications team have been doing lots of work. So, for example, linking our wellbeing champions work with Project Zero. So they run a series of different sessions that go out into the community to undertake work that is related to Project Zero. Your committee saw the volunteering policy as part of the people strategy recently as well, Chair. And one of the ambitions with that volunteering strategy is to enable our colleagues to get out into the community and do work related to Project Zero as well. So I think you're absolutely right, though. There's something about this becoming a way of working and something that is culturally important to us. And ever with that kind of work, it's an ongoing process. But I think the foundations are certainly there.
That's good to hear. Councillor Wood, you've got your hand up. I don't know if that's legacy or did you want to ask another question?
That's a legacy. Apologies.
That's okay. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask finally, I believe this is more of a political question, so actually I'd rather if this was answered by the Cabinet member responsible as leader, because the UK Climate Change Committee published a progress report 2 weeks ago on the progress of Wales's targets towards net zero by 2050 and also the routes of decarbonisation within the public sector by 2030. And one of the recommendations within the report was to do with working with local authorities to develop a agreed framework to understand which aspects of reaching net zero was the responsibility of local government and which ones were the responsibility of Welsh government. A huge part of this was to have a clearer shared understanding, but also to understand whose responsibility it is to reach different areas of decarbonisation, particularly within schools, social services and different sectors such as social housing. Whose responsibility is it and who's funding it? I just wondered if they would like to make a comment regarding this recommendation and the work that's being done with Welsh Government to ensure that we are being held accountable to ourselves, but also that we are being held accountable by the public and that we're not shifting blame on who reaches net zero and how we do it, and that we're going to be as responsible and open as possible when we're reaching our net zero targets, that we are not shifting the blame and that we are not infighting within ourselves as we combat this, one of the greatest threats that we've ever seen to human existence, and that we are working constructively with Welsh Government and all levels of government. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett, would you like to come in? Yes, thank you.
Yes, I can, Chair. Thank you. It's an interesting one because, as in most things we do, we have to work out how we're going to deliver it. Sometimes there's funding from Welsh Government, sometimes we have to rely upon our own reserves. And when we were talking about the earlier conversation about the fact that reserves haven't been spent, well, that's basically because we've been able to access funding for some of the areas that we were taking forward in work. If you look right back to the original motion, and it was in separate parts where we were talking about how, as Tom just mentioned, we would seek to be community leaders so that we were helping residents and organisations, etc., in the Vale to actually develop their own plans for the way forward, but also that we would not only work with others, and we work at regional level, we work at national level, constantly sharing information with other local authorities. We also work very closely with Welsh Government on this, and we're very fortunate that we've got a minister who is very open to discussion and admits, you know, none of us have all the answers at the moment. We've just heard about housing, and it is a big question about, well, what is the right way to decarbonise a house? There's an awful lot of discussion, but nobody's come up with a definitive answer for specific ages of houses. So, you know, the areas that we talked about was that we would work with it. We would do the actions we could on our own. We would work with others. We would also lobby, and we would lobby both Welsh and UK government, one for their support, but also for their finance. And finally, that we would seek to be community leaders to work with our communities, and that's where the sort of engagement side comes in. That it's a very important activity, so that we are all working in the same direction. So I hope that sort of explains. It's the complexity of taking this agenda forward, but where we're trying to exert pressure to get results for the Vale.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Franks, you've been very patient. Would you like to ask some more questions?
As you have been with me, you'll be pleased to know I've pared down my questions, committee, and I'd like to turn to the Cabinet member with my final couple of points. We're all aware that government of any description can be generous to start with initiatives, and then as time goes on, it goes to 50% and 20% and 0%. I'm particularly anxious about the net zero school support that we currently enjoy, which is 100%. Now, I wonder if we have been able to seek assurances from Welsh Government that this will continue into the reasonable future. And my other point is there are a number of energy reduction schemes in the report, all of which I welcome, and I wonder if the leader can give some indication of the progress of these schemes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Councillor Burnett, would you like to answer any of those?
Yeah,
questions?
I can. I think in terms of the school building programmes, I mean, obviously we were ahead of the game. We were already building a net zero school before Welsh Government announced it. We've now got a very low carbon school that we just delivered in St Barrack, and we've got more zero carbon schools that will open both in September and next Easter. So, but in those, the plans were started, the business cases were agreed, and then zero carbon was added into the criteria of the school. So on that, we had to go back to Welsh Government and say, well, actually, this is what it's going to cost us for those to be zero carbon. As we go forward, zero carbon is a given. So that when we go to Welsh Government with business cases for new schools seeking support, that will already be in the costs of building that school. It is no longer, being zero carbon is no longer an add-on, it is a requirement of schools being built. So, as I said, our business cases will include the finance of that. I haven't heard Welsh Government being anything less than totally supportive of the zero carbon agenda. In terms of energy reduction schemes, I'm going to be the same as Tom here. I'm going to have to go away and ask for details on that, and we can get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Your comment about the schools is a little bit disconcerting, because it does mean that the local authority will have additional costs to achieve net zero. And if I interpret your words correctly, we will not be expecting support from Welsh Government. Is that a fair assessment?
I think, yes, of course you
Chair?
can. Of course you can.
No, I don't think it's a fair assessment, actually, Councillor Franks. I, in effect, when we talk to Welsh Government about our funding needs, then we will look at the funding we've got available, and we will look at what they've got available. And we come to an agreement in terms of funding. That's the way it's always been. And, you know, all I'm saying is that zero carbon is not dropping off the list. It's actually an integral part of school buildings. And so it will be part of the construction costs. If there's an intervention rate of sort of 85%, then so be it. But at the same time, if we don't have, if the funds that we have is not sufficient, then, you know, again, we would be having those negotiations with Welsh Government. And to be very fair, when you look at our track record, Welsh Government have been hugely supportive in terms of helping us to deliver quite a phenomenal school building programme over the past 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. I don't know if we've got any more questions. And my last question, which is less of a question and more of a statement, and I'm really sorry. It's already been mentioned by both Councillor Haynes and Councillor Wood, and this will come as no surprise to Tom, I'm sure. But as 89.5% of carbon emissions lies with scope 3, which is all of our procured goods, services and works, what I really, really would like to see is a focus on how we're going to do this. We've included, and I am really grateful to see that the new procurement strategy links to the climate challenge plan, that we are looking at evaluating social value within our contracts for awards that are above our ODU threshold. All of that's great. But with the majority of the emissions lying with these products, services and goods, as I've said, we need to see more. We need to understand how are we going to ensure that before we even consider going out to tender, that we are looking at reusing, repurposing, recycling, remanufacturing. How are we going to see that the governance is there, that the work is there to make sure that that happens? And then the monitoring of social value and the working with the suppliers to shorten the supply chains, because we can do all this, but we need the resource and we need the focus. So I just wanted to make sure that that point was made, because I know, as do the others, this is purely a question of resource and we can do it. We can do it. Thank you. Okay, so is there anybody else who'd like to pass any comments before we move on? No? That's brilliant. So the recommendations were that committee notes the progress which has been detailed in this report and Appendix A with all of its challenges, and that committee note that the funding available in reserves and the arrangements to approve their use to progress future schemes. Committee note the performance indicators in Appendix B. That committee refers this report and all of our comments, and I'm really sorry, Mark, because there's been lots of comments here from tonight's debate to Cabinet to be considered alongside the comments that were made, and this was at the ENR Scrutiny Committee back in January, and that the committee recommend to Cabinet that this report now be distributed to all elected members and the Public Service Board and town and community councils for their information. So I think if we can have a hand to move. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. That was great. Thank you. That was a really good debate. We can move on now to number agenda item 7.
Sorry, Chair. Got Councillor Hamilton, I think, put his hand up.
He was seconding that.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Chair.
Was there anything else you wanted to say, Councillor Hamilton?
No, thank you, Chair. No.
Great. Thank you very much. So agenda item 7 then. We move on. This is the hybrid meeting platform update. Now, this has come from Cabinet that sat on the 8th of June. It's an update on the findings of the Council's hybrid meeting platform. This was their regression testing. And it's over to Debbie Miles now for an update. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to be bringing this report to committee tonight. As you'll be aware, it's one of 2 reports. So we've got a part 2 report later setting out some commercially sensitive data. But for the purposes of the part 1, I've tried to put as much in as I possibly could. So the report outlines the immense work which has been undertaken by a significant team of officers. I'm just speaking on behalf of them, and we've undertaken considerable regression testing. We've also worked with our current supplier. We've undertaken data gathering, information liaising with other local authorities, looking at what's available in the marketplace, speaking with suppliers, and using that information to inform the functional requirements list, and that's set out in Appendix A. As set out in the reference, a couple of paragraphs just for highlighting. So paragraph 210 sets out Civico's current position with regards to the platform that we're currently in contract with, so they're not developing that, and also paragraphs 218, 219. I wanted to particularly refer committee's attention to, which sets out the preferred way forward. So a couple of options there, but the preferred way forward is to undertake on a 12-month basis a performance assessment, proof of concept, if you like, arrangement with, at the council's discretion, the option to then enter into a 3-year contract with an option to extend for 1 additional year. So that's the third course of action. I've highlighted also within the report paragraph 226 highlights that in the meantime, obviously, we continue with our current arrangements, which as monitoring officer, I'm satisfied meets our requirements for hybrid meetings under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. So that continues. But we're moving apace now with the work that's been undertaken. So we're looking to move forward with that 12-month proof of concept arrangement. The report also picks up a number of practical and resource implications. One of them being the work that's been undertaken in canvassing members regarding a choice of language. So I was keen to get that piece of work underway as soon as possible, so that we could liaise with our service provider, translation provider, to look to make the appropriate arrangements for Welsh translation and making sure that there's capacity there. So that piece of work, you'll be aware, is ongoing. I think a deadline has been set for Friday, if that's at all possible for members to meet that, so that we can liaise with the service provider there. Also, a couple of other areas that we'll be looking at is a feasibility study about fixed layout of the council chamber, maybe a committee room or 2, just to see what that would entail, and also looking at live streaming. Doing a piece of work looking at whether we, like other authorities, move to broadcasting the day after a meeting, but with certain key meetings being live streamed. So a bit of work there that we're looking at as officers, but the main thrust of the report is obviously bring to committee's attention the work that we've been doing to explore the way forward with regards to our hybrid platform. So I think for the purposes of the part 1 report, I'll leave it there. Happy to take any questions as long as it doesn't move into the commercially sensitive area. But the recommendations from Cabinet are before the resolutions before you, and obviously for the matter to be considered by Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Debbie. So for Council to note, we are looking at this part of the particular agenda item, just really looking at the regression testing itself and questions around that. Everything else, which might be slightly commercially sensitive, we will be doing in part 2. So if we could just remember that. Councillor Carroll, you've got your hand up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I'm deeply concerned at the number of issues that were identified with the Civico service. I mean, I appreciate everything that's been said about potentially commercially sensitive information, but just a handful of some of the problems that were identified: audio and video quality, delegates being disconnected mid-meeting, delegates unable to hear or see one another, inability to connect to the meeting. Now, that's not just 1 or 2 minor issues. That just seems to be a system that's not fit for purpose. Now, the authority has spent money having this software put in place. So are we going to be receiving a refund for breach of contract for the fact that they haven't provided what they agreed to provide? And more generally, I think that the whole process of rectifying this seems pretty convoluted. I mean, I get that you've needed to look at other authorities for examples, but I've got colleagues on Cardiff Council and they seem to have been able for some time to hold hybrid meetings without any of the issues that we've experienced in the Vale. So rather than sort of going through a process that's taken many months, could we not just have gone to Cardiff, seen that they've got a system that works and replicate that? Because I think that it would have enabled us to sort this much more quickly, because I noticed that one thing that is absent from all of this is a timescale, and obviously it's been something we've been pushing for some time, and it really does need to be rectified as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Debbie, please answer what you can of that question.
Yes.
in this part of the meeting.
Absolutely. Yes, the first point, I'll take that up under part 2 of the agenda. The second point about Cardiff Council, we are aware that I think Cardiff Council have fairly recently changed their provider for their hybrid platform. And again, I think there's some confidential, sort of commercially sensitive aspect there, but I'll be more than happy to just expand upon that in part 2, and also I can pick up in part 2 about their current provider, yeah, so more than happy to pick that up under part 2. With regards to timescale, certainly one point that is in the public domain is the fact that there's reference to a VEET notice with regards to the part 2 report that's in the public domain. It appears, and it is being considered, that there is a framework agreement for one of the providers. That being the case, that will speed up the process, and I can expand upon that in part 2. But I've been provided with a Gantt chart setting out timelines that's come through to me today. I think it's fair to say there will be a soft launch, as you'd expect. So rather than looking to go all out with a new system, we'll be in the spirit of a proof of concept approach, going in a stepped approach, but keen once we have an appropriate contract in place to move ahead with that soft launch. The indications, and I'm probably going to regret sort of giving an indication, but the indications are that we could potentially be in a position to start that soft launch next month. So those are the timescales that I'm hearing at this stage, but obviously we'll be keeping members fully informed in that regard.
Thank you, Debbie. Councillor Haynes, I think you're next with a question to do with regression testing.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question again, I'm afraid, and it's nothing Debbie Miles will be able to answer, I should imagine. It's more a point. I'm really disappointed in this report. I would have thought that there would have been a timeline included of how things didn't work. We got up to December and everything goes quiet as far as timelines are concerned. This project, well, I think this committee should be presented with a full breakdown of this project and governance and audit, to be honest, explaining from the start of the ordering process to the point where someone decided it was so fit and so not fit for purpose that they want to cancel the contract. It's nothing in that in the report, either part of it, and I do think that should come to this committee. And as a matter of urgency, we need to learn lessons of what has gone wrong. I can't believe it's all Civico's fault. We must hold ourselves to blame somewhere, because we did order it. So I just think that it seems to me it's gone, oh, it's not working, we'll go on to something else. And I just think that this committee should receive full information on what has happened. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Debbie, I mean, as far as, you know, there have been a number of issues, and we can see that from this report. And those issues continued for a couple of months, as Councillor Haynes has pointed out. I mean, I think it might be quite helpful to committee once we are at a point where we've possibly appointed a new supplier and everything's working, that we have a look at this, as he said. And I would appreciate seeing, you know, in all of the things that happened and when they happened and what were the considerations. I think that would be a lessons learned exercise for all of us. And I understand, you know, we're not the only ones who have struggled with a system that just didn't work once COVID hit, and all of these additional requirements were put on it. And I know we're not the only local authority, but yeah, sorry, over to you, Debbie. Sorry.
Yes, more than happy to bring a further report at that point. I think it's fair to say the energy and resource has been very much focused on finding a way forward. But yes, I entirely agree. A lessons learnt paper will be of value.
Thank you. Councillor Franks, you're next.
Thank you very much. I'd like to endorse your comments just now, Chair. I think they were most appropriate. I've got to say, this saga has really shown the Vale in a very poor light, and I tremble to think of the reputational damage that's been caused. Regarding finance, I have asked previously, not on this committee but elsewhere, for details of how much has been spent, and I'm sad to say I received no substantial reply. I think committee does need to know how much has been spent, not only on the contract but officer time as well, and lost opportunity. And perhaps this report that we are now promised will answer this question, but there doesn't seem to be anyone who has accepted responsibility for this dreadful situation. So I do hope the report that eventually comes to us is no holds barred and we find out the absolute truth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Debbie, I'm sure it will be a comprehensive report on the reflections, won't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else like to ask any more questions on this particular part of this subject? No? Okay, that's great. Well, the recommendations were simply that this update should be considered by committee and be noted. So we've done that. So can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you. So Councillor Goodjohn and also Councillor Franks to second that. That's great. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8 is any item which the chair has decided could be urgent, part 1, and you'll be glad to know that I don't have any. Agenda item 9, part 2. Now, this part of the meeting